Happy Wednesday, everybody. Coming to you live from my garden. I just had some banana bread, so I'm hoping it's not all in my teeth. Couple of announcements to start off. Starting from now, next week, and into the rest of the summer, summer, I will be going live at 7 p.m., not 3 p.m. 3 p.m. was more of like the winter hours, so we had some daylight, but now that the sun is up well past 7 o'clock, yay, I'll be going live at 7. Makes it a little bit easier for someone like me who works in the garden during the day, for clients to be available in the evenings for this live stream. So just a heads up, it'll be 7 o'clock starting next Wednesday on the same place, the Guelph Tool Library live stream. And we save all of our videos to the IGTV and YouTube, so if you didn't catch this on time live, where I do answer questions if you ever have them, you can always join us later and watch it when you have time. There's a lot of them already up there with a lot of great tips, even from last year, about how to build raised beds, and that's definitely something I'm going to do more of this year as well, is just tutorials on how I do certain things like building raised beds and how I fill them, making trellises, things like that. The other announcement, don't mind the saw from a neighbor, the other announcement is that there's a live Q&A with Stephanie and Susan from the Guelph Tool Library and the Guelph Seed Library. So if you have any questions, you want a virtual tour of what the tool library looks like right now and how it works, you can still register for that through Eventbrite and check that out at 6:30 tonight. We have a lot going on, which is super exciting. We're trying to keep our virtual content alive so that you guys have stuff to do during this lockdown in Ontario, if that's where you're residing. Today I wanted to talk about a couple things. Now that we have those announcements out of the way, there's probably some other stuff, but it'll come up in my head as we're going along. There's a couple of fundraisers we're going to have going on for our community garden and the seed library, t-shirts, kits you can buy, and some more virtual workshops. On the 29th, we have a workshop with myself and Susan from the Guelph Seed Library talking about soil. So we have kits available. I believe it's $10 or $15, something like that, sliding scale kits. Together we are going to be testing our soil for just the general quality and structure of that, if you're curious. And then I'm going to talk about how you can get even more testing done if that's something you're interested in. And the kit includes some litmus paper strips. They test the pH of the soil. So the kits include like a jar where you can add a quarter cup of your own soil from your yard. Just reach in there with a little cup or a scoop or a spoon, whatever you like, your fingers. Put it inside the jar, shake it up, wait about 24 hours, and then we're going to get together on Zoom and talk about the results and how to interpret that, and maybe some tips for ways to improve your soil. So if you want to test specifically where you grow your vegetables or a flower or something like that, something to keep in mind. If you live somewhere where you have a new build, the soil might be really different in your front yard and backyard. Or in that area of Guelph. I'm really lucky to have a dad who is a soil scientist, so I do have a little bit of background and help in that department, and he has always been a super big help in terms of how to structure and feed my soil. So I've always had really great soil wherever I've lived because he comes over and takes over with his science mind and helps me out. Said, hey, you need more sand in here. So if there's stuff like that you want to find out about your garden, April 29th is that workshop, and you'll want to sign up before that so that you can get your kit. Obviously that serves our local community here in Guelph, but if you're from far away and you still want to do that, message me and we'll see how you can join in with us. So today I want to talk about DIY cloches. A cloche is like a mini greenhouse, a protectant cover or something that you make that can, like a bell, cloche, obviously, cloche in French means bell, and that is something that can cover your tender little plants and protect them from snow. Everybody in Guelph or north of Guelph was probably surprised, or I wasn't surprised. I knew it was coming and I was hoping I'd get this workshop in before, but we didn't quite make it, to a little blanket of snow last night. And for the most part, things that are coming up in April can survive a little bit of snow like that and minus temperatures, -5 about last night. It's going back down to -5 tonight, Celsius. So things like lilies, tulips, daffodils, and other spring kind of ephemeral bulb type plants are totally fine in the snow. And in a lot of ways, the snow falls and kind of creates like an insulating blanket. Over here, we did a winter sowing workshop a little bit earlier in the year when we still could. And we're going to do that next year too. And all of these bottles, I have started things inside of them. If we kind of zoom in here, let it focus. I started a bunch of seeds, a lot of my older seeds. So there's a lot of seed in there, kind of a mass planting situation. I'll check in this one. You can kind of see there's a different variety on both halves. I kind of did one on one side, one on the other. This side, one side didn't really come up, the one did. It's all been, and then this one's kind of sad. The one type of seed came up and then the other one didn't really, but these are all winter sown containers. And we did a series of workshops on how to do that. And this kind of is the same thing. We have a source for these amazing kind of canteen water bottles for like that office place water thing, I guess. I personally don't use any of these, but if you have a friend or a source or your workplace or someone who normally would maybe recycle these or throw these out, it's a great thing to grab. We have a bunch of these available from the Guelph Seed Library. If you want to get one, they're $4, and all that money goes back into our programming and a lot of the things we're doing this year. All the vegetables we're growing at the Grow Garden for donation. So if you want one of these to make a little greenhouse or a cloche, which I'll show you how to do in a minute, then you can contact us and they'll be $4. There'll be some more info about that soon. But yeah, we'll come back to that. So yeah, all of these are winter sown, basically cut in half with some soil, and you can start these super early in the year. I don't want to get too into it because we did have people pay for that workshop, but everything there's different flowers and things, and I've been collecting from various things from people's recycling bins. Again, I'm not really a soda, I don't even know, pop, soda, whatever you call it, drinker at all. I hate fizzy stuff, and I'm not a water bottle fan, but sometimes there are various workplaces that need these for various reasons, so I use them up. One thing I do use, and if I slide over my poly panel here, are these deeper versions. One is a shorter one. I'm kind of experimenting with that, but these are spinach salad. I mean, I get spinach, but whatever you get in there. On one side, I did some lettuce starts. It's actually quite warm in there. I'm putting my hand in. I'm putting some cold air in there doing that right now. But there's some holes drilled on the top and the bottom, and it's like a little greenhouse, and I can start some seedlings in there. Doesn't really get stuff done ahead of time. Things grow a little bit slower, but they're very hardy. I mean, there was snow in here. There's some Swiss chard, and these were a mix of cauliflowers. So direct sown outdoors, some of the best stuff you can start right now would be spinach, would be cauliflower, broccoli, what else? Peas. It's a pretty good time, even though we still have some pretty cold nights ahead. Yeah, it's pretty warm in here. It's cold outside, so these are probably not loving me opening this, but it'll warm back up. I started a bunch of flower seed in here, and they actually came up really good. I thought the seed was super old, so it's a little bit tight, but I'm gonna move them out when I have some time. I did some spinach. Not a great germination on that spinach, so it was getting a little bit older, but that's something you could start right now, even if you don't have a way to cover them up. It's something you can start outside with your peas. Any kind of green is really, you're good to go. So kales, your rocket or arugula, spinach, lettuces, pak choi, bok choy, joy choy family, things like that do okay. If you have something you can cover them up in, like a row cover, or a poly panel like this, or some fleece, it's called, like row fleece. That works really well. In an earlier live stream, let's see if it'll let me. These are just tipped just so on top of my raised beds. kind of glad everything survived. But in one of our earlier live streams, we actually started this kale from seed, and then I transplanted them in the fall into this raised bed for protection, and then they've been under these poly panels all winter long and are really starting to take off. They were more or less that size. I've got a chicken screaming in the background who just laid an egg probably somewhere. But we started these guys, and it's really taking off. And it's a good way if you want your kale to actually go to seed, to do some seed saving. It needs to be a pretty old plant, so I'm hoping that maybe this one will go to flower this year and I can actually save some seeds. I think this is just a red borer, red curly kale, nothing too fancy. And I love this variety because when this gets a little bit bigger, you can just pick the lowest leaves, and it'll keep growing tall, and you can just keep it going by only taking those lower leaves. So yeah, definitely recommend that. This is a great time to start indoors greens as well, and then you can transplant them exactly where you want them to grow. I'm just trying to close this very carefully. That's my plan with a lot of these bottles, is that when we get a little bit warmer, I'll be able to open them back up and select the seedlings out of there, give them a bit more room. It's funny, there's even some, if I zoom in here, I started them all around, like all the seeds that are in here were started at one time, but it looks like there's still some coming up, a little bit delayed. And that's totally fine. That's actually a seed right there that's pushed to the surface that hasn't sprouted. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I always you can direct sow Swiss chard. It is an incredibly hardy, versatile vegetable if you've never used it. But personally, I like to start it in something like this or a container because it comes in so many different colors, and I like to kind of choose which colors go where beside what other plant. Because sometimes it's nice to pop in like a bright orange one with some flowers or a red one here or there. So that's how I decide. I just started these the other day, a couple days ago. I don't see any action just yet, and I think that's totally normal. But yeah, let me show you how I would prepare, a little zoomed in here, prepare one of these as a cloche or maybe a mini greenhouse. I always have a handy dandy X-Acto knife. You can use like a jigsaw or a saw on here if you feel adapted to that and you feel safe enough using one on plastic. This isn't too bad. It's a little bit, you really gotta go at it. I'll show you in a second. I'm gonna start by taking off this label, and that can head straight to the garbage, I think. I don't think this plastic part is recyclable. So this is gonna go in the garbage, unfortunately. And I know for a lot of people, me, myself included, I haven't really been using that much plastic personally, but there still seems to be a ton of it available out there from neighbors and friends and family if I ask. So that's nice when it comes to things like this. It can be super handy and reused. So it's a little bit tricky to cut the texture like this, so I like to choose one of these ridges, and the same goes for any of those smaller bottles, just wherever it makes sense. And then I like to stab, start going at it. I'm making a bit of a sawing motion. I apologize for this terrible sound that this might be making. Be careful if you do that. My knee is right here, so just be careful you don't slide back and hit yourself. Now, if I was going to use this as a greenhouse, I might leave it still attached. I can go a little bit further. But I would kind of leave it still attached like this, because then at least you got your two parts together, and I can still open it up totally fine. As you can see, there's still some water in there. Nobody needs water today. In terms of if you were going to make this a greenhouse right now, you can use X-Acto knife and cut slits. What I like to use is a drill with a very fine, small drill bit, super sharp, and kind of, you can slice your fingers along touching the edges of this. But you just prop it upside down and drill. Drill in the lowest points of this guy, and that would be ready to go as a greenhouse. And like this one over here, it's sealed back up with some tape. We actually have a little bit of light snow happening right now, and like I said, if I just stick my fingers up in here, like, it is warm in there, so it really does work. But we're gonna take this a step further and protect some vulnerable plants somewhere in the garden. Not a lot of things are coming up just yet. Maybe I'll show you some hosta shoots. But all I'm gonna do for that, the nice thing too, if you're gonna make it a little greenhouse and you leave it, no matter how you cut this, maybe it's a little bit uneven, it'll always settle back down completely where you want it. It almost like goes back together, as you can see. If I do detach it, you're gonna forget the rotation that you put it on. It might be a little bit wobbly, but I'm gonna use this, now that I've drilled holes in it, I might just use it to mass sow some lettuce in here and put it somewhere kind of as a planting tray. You could alternatively not do holes in here and use it as a base for a house plant, or even a plant outside that you don't want to leak soil onto your, or like water onto your deck or something. That could be another use for this. But I've got some holes in this one and it'll come in handy. I'm going to put a lot of soil in here, potting mix, seed starting mix of some kind. I like to, if I'm doing stuff outdoors and not under some grow lights, I like to use a straight up potting mix with some compost, because it's like direct sowing but just in a container. So if I was to put a bunch of lettuce in here, I could then come back, take those out, move them where I want them, space them how I want. Or I could just make this a whole lettuce bowl and get some kind of decorative situation around this instead of just the plastic. Now that we have just the top, I'm like on my knees here so I can see the live stream what you guys are seeing, so it's some valued content. It has one of those like lids for when you attach it to one of those like, I don't know what you call it, like water machines. I don't work in an office, I don't know, and I'm not really a fan of any of those TV shows that are based in offices, but these actually just come off pretty easily like that. And I like to have that, even though the snow does get in there, we do have some days coming up that are going to be quite warm again, and so that is really going to help some plants sprout underneath, but it's going to give them enough air, and if it rains, give them enough moisture. A lot of these guys over here needed to be watered. Despite having a fairly moisture locking soil in them, they still get a little bit dry when it's super hot, so I have to go around and gently water from the top as not to disturb anybody. There's some alyssum in that one. If I were to water aggressively and like pour, doesn't want to focus, pour on top of that, it would probably just completely wipe out all those seedlings. So I don't want to do that. Got this cloche and it's perfect. It's basically ready to go. If you have a particularly windy garden, there's a couple things you can do. My plan is to just make sure that this is down a solid inch, and maybe even I'll pile some soil kind of around the edges. But if that's not an option, what you can do is take that drill, and drill a hole close to the bottom, not so close that it's going to rip right through, but close enough to the bottom, and then get a landscaping staple, and you're going to kind of use that as an anchor, maybe one on both sides, and that would make sure that it doesn't blow away if we had a crazy storm. I've got some, basically the only thing that's made an appearance in this bed, I did add some soil over top, was this lily that I still don't know what color it is. It's pretty small leafed, so my guess is probably a baby yellow, but I actually found this guy at the dump. last fall. Free plants are awesome. A daylily, for example, is not really a plant that needs extra protection per se from the snow. They do pretty well. Some of the taller lilies do get a little bit damaged this time of year. But if you have something that's really taken off, that's really delicate, and you'd like some protection from not only the temperature, but maybe the wind and that temperature, this is the way to go. Looks like there's a little hosta there. I don't remember. I've got a canoe here that kind of shades this corner, so my hope was the lily would just expand beyond. So that doesn't really need it, but that's essentially the plan. If I find, there's some other hostas in here. I saw right there coming up. Someone's chewed that one. But we've got a little piece of hosta there. You can actually cut hosta like asparagus. I mean, obviously it's much shorter, but you can actually cut it and eat it like asparagus. And there's varieties developed specifically for that, but if you have some plain mass plantings of hosta, I definitely recommend it. It's actually sweeter than asparagus. Tastes about the same, and you kind of blanch it in a pan. Tastes pretty good. So there's a little guy there. Again, at this size, it's very hardy. Alright guys, I thought I was on my 5G, but my Wi-Fi is inside there. And if I go too far, it gets upset. So I apologize. But this guy would be a good candidate to cover up because it's very delicate. And it came up pretty early, and they probably wouldn't mind. That's the one I'm going to choose. And I've got kind of a serrated edge on this, like it's pretty sharp, and I'm just twisting it around this plant, being careful not to actually damage it. But it is going to really appreciate that, I think. Tonight we're going back down to -5. So hopefully my Wi-Fi sticks. I'm actually getting closer to my network here. And this bed is mostly hostas again. I mean, most of my gardens are part shade, so it just makes sense. They came up really roaring start. I mean, the house is right there, so a bit of a microclimate. This is Empress Wu. It's a very large hosta. I may have to move this one. This one is called, I believe, something like Lime Sunrise, Chinese Sunrise. It's a really pretty, like, lime green, smaller leaves hosta. These guys really don't need it. I mean, these got pretty tall, and they did have snow on them earlier, but they seem to have survived. Unfortunately, my chickens got out a couple times and did some damage, but they should bounce back and throw up a couple more leaves, hopefully. Yeah, they can be sneaky. Chickens can do a lot of damage in a garden. I definitely let them free range in the winter time when they can't do any damage, but as the stuff is coming up, they can do some more This host is called Rainbow's End. I can personally see the colors. It looks like maybe a little bit of damage, like if I zoom in on this one, like a little bit blanched from the snow, but usually they do okay. The girls are doing their thing. That's Patrice, the laced one there. The red one is Fiona. Fiona and Patrice are sisters. They're quiet now. There's Valentina and one of the Gray sisters having a little rest. Yeah, there you go. So, things are coming along in the garden, and now that you guys know how to make some cloches, you don't have to just use water bottles, obviously. You can use any kind of thing. Like what else? I've got this Tupperware container. Not Tupperware, it's like a storage container. Still has some ice on it. But something like this, with a couple of holes drilled in the top, you want to make sure that your plants are getting fresh air and water once it actually drips in there. But just that little bit of protection can be really nice. If you have some tenders and you really want to extend the season, you can make a little greenhouse out of this. I definitely recommend, again, drilling some holes along the edges and using like a landscape staple to keep that in the ground. Yeah, honestly, really not that much stuff starting just yet. My gold raspberries, let's see, looking pretty good. They survived this, and the area that I'm in right here is a bit of a microclimate as well, so they got a little bit of a head start. They look pretty good. I'm sure as the weeks progress, you're going to see quite a difference in the garden, especially if we're back to normal temperatures by next week. I saw 15 degrees for Friday, so I'm excited about that. Back to normal. Don't have to dress like it's winter time and freeze my hands off working outside. But yeah, just to reiterate, we have these available. If you live in Guelph, if you're part of our network with the Guelph Tool Library, the Guelph Seed Library, Backyard Caring, we have these. My tripod is, there we go. We have these available. If you want to make your own cloche, once you take this lid off and the label off, the green one especially, kind of reminds me of like a wine carboy, and it looks really fancy. And quite nice. Like, it doesn't look too junky. I mean, I don't, it happens when in the winter time in the garden, like, things look a little bit junky sometimes because you're using recycled things. I finished off this vinegar. I tried to get the label off, wasn't really cooperating. I could have more patience, but it doesn't really matter. The plants don't really care. And the way I have my winter sown veggies all lined up, doesn't really need to be too fancy. I love that it has a handle, because once you cut this and turn this into a little greenhouse, you can also make a cloche. If you only want to make a cloche and you don't want to save the bottom, you can cut it even closer to the bottom, and then you have a little bit more height, and you can leave this on, you know, right up until May, and you can really get some advanced growth underneath something like this. But if you want to use the bottom to sow, you can actually put little pots in here. You can put those little Jiffy pellets in here, or just soil, and make a little closed container greenhouse out of this. I just love the handle because you could literally pick them up and move them around and line them up. And Sharpie Pro Sharpies, I picked up one of those from the dollar store before we had our full-on lockdown and you can't buy pens anymore. They work really well on the side of this. You can write exactly what's in here. So back to these. Again, you just need to take off that outside, and you've got a pretty cool looking cloche. You can do even deeper if you want something a little bit taller. Stick it over your rhubarb, force that a little bit taller. And then maybe I'll show you how to make a chicken wire cloche out of one of these as well at a later date. So if you have chickens, or you have a kitty or a dog that likes to chew on some of your plants, you want to keep things a little bit more protected from rabbits, you can actually take one of these and some chicken wire and use it as a form to make a chicken wire cloche as well. So for now, we're using it as a greenhouse just to stave off some frostbite on our plants and maybe expand the season, but there's a lot you can do with recycled stuff and still make it look really good. So just a reminder again, if you want to see the live stream tonight, it's a Q&A and virtual tour of the Guelph Tool Library. Again, my neighbor's, just working away with a saw outside. Sorry about that. That's at 6:30 through Eventbrite. You can check out more information about that on the Instagram or our Facebook. It's free registration. We just have it through Eventbrite so we know who's there. We can give you the information and not just give the info out to anyone to join our Zoom meeting. And Susan from the Seed Library will be there to talk about some stuff that's going on. And if you're interested in free seeds and you live in the Guelph area, Guelph Seed Library has seeds available. You don't have to be a member of the Guelph Tool Library. You just have to listen to what we have to say about saving seeds and how we work. And we have a bunch of free seeds available this year. Basically everything and anything you can imagine. All we ask is that when you grow it, you save some seed back to us. Some things it doesn't work, like pumpkins. We don't take garden pumpkins back, but we do have a lot of pure seed available for people. So that is really good. Yeah. And then the 29th, we have the soil workshop. If you're interested in that, there's an Eventbrite, and there's a link to that on our Facebook and through any of our social media. Or you can message me, Meredith at Backyard Caring, if you want to know more about that. It's a sliding scale for attendance, and you get a kit with all the supplies you need to do that basic soil test. So yeah, see you next week at 7 p.m., not 3 o'clock. And yeah, I look forward to it. If you have any suggestions for things you want me to cover in the upcoming weeks, let me know. And I will try to do it. I'll try to talk about it. If you have questions during the stream, I answer them. So yeah, have a really good day, everybody, and stay warm. Bye.